say, subtle trends in advertising, and then the movies. And then most ominously, what is happening in our own towns and cities. And for those paying attention to events in the rest of the white world, and the trend is irrefutable. The fact is, the deliberate denigration of white culture and history has done more to create a sense of racial awareness and brotherhood in white people around the world in the last few years than could ever have been hoped for by what the media likes to refer to as right-wing extremism. It has been said that political correctness is simply a ban on noticing. The ability to notice what is occurring in the white world does not mean you have a pathological hatred of all things beige or slightly off-white. That's ridiculous. But in essence, that is what we are being expected to believe. In truth, the fact that normal people notice the obvious simply means that you are not so shallow and gullible as to accept without question the ridiculous lies and obfuscations put forward by our government. Race is an extension of family, the people we have known and experienced life with for thousands of years, a shared racial bond established over millennia and encoded deeply, genetically and spiritually in the people we have become today. New Zealanders are generous people, forbearing to a fault. When I was in Wellington last year, the Flag Day, I was confronted as an independent citizen. In one instance, a young Indian man used a megaphone to scream in my face that I was a racist. Imagine that. New Zealand has a predominantly white European culture, settled predominantly by white people from the British Isles. We let a man from a foreign race and culture into our country, who then screams his demands and accusations at white citizens that we are racist for not allowing more people like him into our country. New Zealanders are forbearing to a fault. Forbearing means an abstaining from the enforcement of a right. That right is to live in peace in our country with our own people unmolested, a fairly reasonable expectation, I would have thought. We like to feel good about ourselves and our generosity and our hospitality. We've been led to believe that all people are the same no matter where they come from or what their background is. So we bow our heads, fail to complain and pretend not to notice what has happened to our country. I'll bring it down to a personal level just to try and make the point. It's somewhat like having visitors come to stay in your house. At first you welcome them with open arms. It's somewhat like having visitors come to stay, who at first you welcome with open arms. It's all smiles and laughter as you feed them, ply them with liquor, give them a room and a bed, and tell them to make themselves at home, which they do. And all is well. They stay longer than expected. They bring their children and their parents and take another room. They use the kitchen at all hours and leave the cooking smells of a foreign land lingering in the air. The delightful novelty of another culture in your home soon loses its shine. You come home from work one day to find your family outnumbered, your couch unavailable, your fridge empty, and bills on the table. Upstairs, the son is making himself known to your teenage daughter. They are doing what you said, making themselves at home. Only now, by becoming their home, it is no longer yours. New Zealanders have found themselves, after years of altruistic generosity, in the completely intolerable position of having to say to the visitors, well, actually, this is our home. This is our house that we built, we made for us. You have come in here and behaved as if our land is vacant, as if we do not exist, as if our country is a vacant piece of land that is freely available for you to come and claim as you see fit and build your own culture here as if there was nothing here to begin with. Everything we had, we took for granted while it was not under threat, but now that you have taken our peace, we see what we had and we want it back. Mass non-white immigration is a problem occurring in all white countries and only white countries. In each country, the characteristics of this replacement are slightly different and the process may be further along in some places than others. But the demographic change is occurring at breakneck speed and the justifications used are always the same. It's either the moral obligation or the economic imperative. These decisions have always been made in private by politicians, bureaucrats and business leaders who only see the wonderful benefits of mass immigration to suppress wages and lift profits. We have young men working in New Zealand trying to support a wife and child on $17 and $18 an hour. They would like to have more children, but they simply can't afford it. This is a demographic catastrophe in the making. In a few years' time, you can well imagine the government declaring in great surprise, gosh, Who knew? There's not enough people. What a surprise. I know, they'll say. Let's open the borders. And they'll open the borders to Asia, to China, to India, and to Pakistan, and Africa with its teeming millions, and to the Middle East. But will these same people think about helping our racial brothers and sisters escape crushing poverty and ethnocide in South Africa? Or help our European people escape the broken cities of Europe? I seriously doubt it, because that is not diversity. How has this situation come about where our young people simply cannot afford to have children, when for decades upon decades, through every election cycle, all we ever hear about is the economy? Even now, the government has backed itself into a corner. We have an immigration-based economy with real GDP of zero or close to it. This is a situation that cannot be allowed to continue. It will be disastrous for everyone, new foreign immigrants, New Zealand whites, and Maori people alike. White survival. White survival is completely unacceptable to the global elites. Our survival as a distinct racial and cultural group undermines the foundations of what has been called the New World Order. This is what is required for this global dream to work, is the transformation of a diverse, multicultural world of nations and peoples into a global mass of faceless units of consumption and production. For us to survive would mean a complete about-face, an absolute rejection and refutation of everything we've been taught to believe about our people for 100 years. We must love what we have been taught to hate. Up until now, we have been taught to tolerate that which will destroy us, to love those that hate us, and to disregard our own ethnic interests. We have been taught to pretend that we have no group interests at all because we don't exist. All of these concepts are false and fatal to our prospects. We are now at a point as a civilization where we can no longer afford to silently tolerate those amongst us who explicitly preach our death and enslavement, viz. Islam, or even the subtle replacement of our people on the basis of some imposed moral obligation. When we accept that it is wrong or evil and suppress the natural desire to protect our own people, we corrupt ourselves and make a meaningful cultural self-defense impossible. Ideas precede action. As it would seem, the designers of our psychological architecture are well aware. We'll do a big edit there. Just finally, I want to talk about New Zealand white and Pākehā and Maori relationships and how we're going to move forward together. I believe the situation for the New Zealand Maori people is also extremely grim unless they can bring themselves to embrace a nationalistic point of view. My point of view is that Maori interests are best served by supporting the only party in New Zealand that explicitly seeks to preserve the traditional ethnic and cultural makeup of New Zealand. It is extremely disheartening to see Maori activists siding with left-wing groups whose aims will directly undermine Maori prospects. The left uses the seductive language of human rights to pit one group against the other. Whether it is human rights, Maori rights, or land rights, none of these rights are going to be of any use to you if you have no job and no benefit and are left to stand in line as just another member of just another minority group in a fractured and broken society. In this dystopian prediction of a not too distant future, New Zealand may have a population of perhaps 7 million, and barring a sudden and dramatic increase in Maori birth rates, the Maori people may fall to perhaps 8% of the population. European New Zealanders could be 48%, with perhaps 44% of the population Asians and Indians. At this point, New Zealand is not our country, but it is only a country, nothing more than an economic region, a corporate profit centre, if you will, and of course that has been the objective all along. Nearly there. I believe the Maori establishment and leadership need to stop looking backwards to historical grievances, real or contrived, and the government needs to ensure that happens by curtailing the gravy train of the grievance industry. Not that I blame any Maori group or individual for taking advantage of the gravy train thus made available. Anyone would do that. But until the government removes the incentive for looking backwards, we will not be able to live in the present or face the problems of the future together. While we are distracted and bickering over grievances of the past, our collective future is being stolen from under our noses. It's like driving down the road, constantly looking in the rear vision mirror. You're going to have an accident doing that. We need to work together pay attention to what's happening on the road ahead, and secure a future for both of our peoples in the land we all call home, our New Zealand. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.